I'd now like to introduce Yvonne Anderson, James Sedgwick and Toomey from the CYP IAPT Participation Group from South London, who are going to give a presentation which has been designed by participation partners from GIFT and the young people as well. So, Yvonne, over to you.
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, our young sessional workers have co-produced this session with us, and we're delighted that we've also got Toomey joining us on the stage very shortly. One of the things our young people and we, working in partnership, were really keen about was that we would try to participate with you and not just talk at you. So, given the time constraint, we've just got 3 very small activities. The first one is just to ask you to engage with us. The second is to ask you to shout. And the third is to make a bit of a commitment and tell us something. So, the first thing that our young people who partner us were really keen to know was, what does CYP IAPT mean to the individuals in this room? And I'd like you to just think about that very quickly, hold an idea in your head. What does it mean to you personally? And then we'll see what it means to some of them.
Tell me, for you, what does CYP IAPT mean to you, John?
CYP IAPT is less about the name or the acronym, and it's more about the values behind it. So it's about empowering the young person and making sure that they have decision over their rights, their treatment, and what they get out of an NHS service.
Okay, thanks a lot.
So here are some more things that the young people said. A different way of young people getting help with their mental health. Change Forever that we helped to create. A new CAMS that involves us in making decisions about us. And it's about shared values. We were quite stunned at that response from those young people, and they are very articulate, but I think what strikes us about that is it demonstrates that those young people have agency, and they feel they have agency, they feel that they have the power to change things, and that they're in the middle of something that's really helpful and promising. So, shared values, the active involvement of children and young people, works best. Young people tell us this, and we know from the evidence, when they have an equal opportunity to be involved, their involvement is valued, it's a visible commitment that's properly resourced, and the policies and standards for the participation of children and young people are produced, evaluated and improved in partnership with those young people. So it's important because it leads to more accessible, appropriate and responsive services, improves relationships, promotes shared perspectives, empowers and enhances life opportunities for young people, helps us develop our skills as well as them develop theirs, impacts on engagement and better clinical outcomes, increases satisfaction and informs planning and service development. In short, it's because it helps service transformation, which is what this project is all about. So we see young people right at the heart of that transformation. We shouldn't really be saying to people now, why bother, but there's still practitioners out there who ask, what is the purpose, what's the point of participation? We come from a basic human rights angle, Article 12 UNCRC, but also children and young people are the only ones who can describe the issues from their perspective, and these are the services that are designed for them. Participation also builds their self-esteem and confidence, and they develop and learn important communication skills and learn to cooperate with adults and other children. Programmes that include participation are often more aware of and responsive to young people's needs, and it can also raise public awareness of children's needs, which is much needed. There are lots of different models. Some of them are quite hierarchical. They say that you start at the bottom with something tokenistic and consultative and move up. Others see it more as a matrix, as a process. We're really happy as a GIFT team to help people with those models, but I think ultimately we don't want people to be trapped in some theoretical framework, because participation's in your head. It's how we work. And we all need to recognise the balance of reaching a constructive, the importance of reaching a constructive and safe balance between the principle of listening to the child's wishes and involving them, and promoting their best interests too. So we're just going to mention one framework because it sits behind the 9 priorities which we use as our framework that you'll be familiar with. It's Here by Right. It was generated by young people in partnership with professionals and has a massive evidence base behind it. And it sits behind the 9 priorities that you'll all be familiar with. But thinking about where it all started, participation, it didn't necessarily start with Hart's ladder here, 1992, that you're probably familiar with, but about 20 years before that with Sherry Arnstein, who promoted a ladder of participation in local neighbourhoods in the United States. And the interesting thing about where this whole participation thing started is it's about citizen participation. And I think for us that's important. We're really keen that young people have a chance to participate, but actually it's part of a whole bigger movement. It's about democracy in action, local people making local change, neighbourhoods working for neighbourhoods. It's part of that whole movement, which is where Sherry came from. Hart took her model and made it more children and young people friendly with the children's ladder of participation here. And what we're going to ask you to do is to think, what rung do you think you're on now? So let me go back. You personally, in your CYPI Act practice, which rung do you think you're on? You don't have to reveal that to anybody. But more importantly, which rung will you be on this time next year? So there they are. At the top, we have shared decisions with adults that are initiated by children and young people and moving down. So you can read. So the interaction here, think of your number in your head. Okay, has everybody got a number? Where you'd like to be or you plan to be this time next year. I'm going to ask you to stand up. Let's see how this goes. This is participation in action. Think of your number on a count of 3. Shout your number of where you're going to be this time next year, and we'll see if we can work out how much ambition we've got in the room. So, 1, 2, 3. Yes. Wow. Just to be sure. That was great. Louder. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Absolutely fantastic. Give yourselves a round of applause. Oh. Thank you for your ambition. We'll try and help you reach it.
So on to the next bit. We're going to hear from some young people now. Unfortunately, you're going to hear my voice reading out their voices. So when you hear the Yorkshire accent, it's young people speaking. Okay? So what they want is that they want to contribute actively as citizens to programmes that affect their lives, which CYPI App does. They want to be empowered to initiate and lead discussions about their services. And that's the real challenge, because we need to change the language that we talk about services. At the moment, I think we claim them as ours, and actually they want to claim them as theirs. So we need to change that language. And we need to give them opportunities to evaluate the care that they get so that it remains appropriate for them. Because as we know, each generation is different, so we need to keep those opportunities going. And this is the real stuff, the young person. So I'll just give you 5 seconds to read that rather than me reading it out. This is one young person that saw having an opportunity to give feedback about the service that she was in as participation. We might call it outcome measurement, we might call it service satisfaction. She saw it as an opportunity to participate. And she was really happy about that, but the one thing that she didn't get was the feedback about how that had impacted on the service and how that had changed the service. So that's really key. Another experience from a young person was really positive. I think you can see the positivity coming through her words. And she'd had a completely different experience to the other young person. She saw having a participation worker as key, somebody that actually focused on it and made it happen. However, they also told us about some barriers. One of the barriers was that the very thing that they're coming to CAMHS for, they're coming to get help with their mental health, but actually they see that sometimes their mental health is a barrier to getting them involved. And my challenge is, if CAMHS can't get these young people to be involved and participate, who is going to get them involved? We need to actively do that. And then the other barrier was about not having the publicity. We need to give opportunities, but we also need to let people know about those opportunities. And we need to actively do that, not passively. So sometimes putting posters up in the waiting room is a really good idea, but what this young person is suggesting is that they actually get some information handed to them, perhaps with their appointment card or whatever it is that might be given out when they come in, because they're not going to sit in a silent waiting room and then get up and get a leaflet. They feel really embarrassed about doing that. So we need to be active in our opportunities for participation. And then lastly, another barrier was the opportunities. She was saying that most people that she knew would be very happy to participate, but not everybody has that opportunity. So we need to know, we need to make those opportunities, and we need to let them know about those opportunities. Otherwise, we're not going to get young people telling us about their services. Another one from a young person, that it was important, really important, to get her opinion across, and that we shouldn't assume that we know what's best for the young person. Obviously, people are trained, they're CAMHS workers in all sorts of different forms, and we do have that knowledge, but actually it's helping that young person to decide for themselves what's best for them and not assuming that we can just tell them what's best. And she also gave a secondary aim that came out of the participation group that she was part of, that it actually supported her beyond the more formal therapy that she got. So although it's not a primary aim of participation, that support, actually it does support young people. It empowers them and allows them to think about recovery. And then finally, they want the CAMHS clinicians that they see, whether that's a counsellor, a psychiatrist or whatever, to encourage and support them in that participation. So they want all of us to know about the participation that's happening in our areas, and all of us to give that encouragement and give that information so that they can get on with it. Okay. So it's all of us in this room. It's not just people with participation in their job title. So just to sum all that up, what they're actually asking for is not great shakes, it's not big things that they're asking for. They're asking to have a voice, to have an opportunity to participate, to know about those opportunities, and for us to know about those opportunities and tell them about it. Being informed about the questionnaire or consultations that happen, what are they actually about? They really want to know that. But the key thing is knowing what difference that made. And that might be, information through waiting list posters, or it might be through groups. They do acknowledge that having a worker with focus on participation does help, but they do want encouragement from their CAMHS worker. So to give us a real-life example of some participation that's taken place, Tumi's going to come up on the stage and tell. She's from Lambeth in Southwark. She's going to tell us about being involved in recruitment and selection.
Hi guys, you'll have to forgive me because I have a cold, so I hope you can hear me. I'm a youth advisor recruit for South London and Maudsley, and I understand that public and patient involvement is an integral part to the functioning of any social organisation, especially such as this one, and I'm very happy to be a part of that. And I'm going to spend a few minutes now talking to you about my recent experience on a recruitment panel. The position was for a Band 7 practitioner for a brand new role based in the Christopher Wren House in Croydon. I can actually honestly say that throughout the entire process, I felt like an essential part of the panel. And after every interview we had, there were 7 in total. Myself and the other 3 really lovely specialists, one of which I know is here right now, so I'm not just saying that, they were really lovely, we would have discussions in which I was a very active part of before coming to any sort of conclusions. I was actually a little surprised myself at the extent of my participation. I was able to ask the candidates questions that I had prepared myself beforehand, and I was also able to probe them further for more detailed answers. What I gained personally from this was a real insight behind the scenes. If you look at the rigorous processes involved in choosing the right person for the job, which I think is very important. And what I hope the specialists got from this was the value that should be placed on having a substantial youth input. In conclusion, sort of, it was very, very enjoyable for me. And I hope that it's something that is not only continued in everything you guys are doing here, but is also expanded on. And I'm personally very lucky to have had such immediate access to specialists. And yeah, it was very cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tumi. Very enlightening and very brave of you to stand up here, because I don't like it. Okay, so just to tell you a little bit about GIFT, because we're aware that some people know as well, some people don't, that we're commissioned by NHS England to support children and young people's participation in CYP IAPT. There's 4 core team members, and we'll put all the contact details up at the end, but we've got a range of partners, so Youth Access right here, Practical Participation, and the National Youth Advisory Team. And each of the collaboratives is linked to a core team member. That doesn't mean you can't talk to the rest of us, just that that's your link into the team. We also have 12 young sessional workers. I just want to tell you a little bit about the work that they've done. It would obviously be preferable for them to be here and telling us that, but it's just not the right time for them to be here. So, what have they done? They do act as the steering group for GIFT. We want them to tell us what it is that they think we should be telling you and what it is that we should be doing. So they do act as our steering group. They've participated in the national interviews for Phase 3, so some of you will have met some of our young sessional workers. They've helped making resources, so a video, for example, that's gone on to MyApt, and writing blogs for MyApt as well. And I'm sure they'd really appreciate it if people would go and view those blogs so that it makes it very active for them and maybe respond to some of the things that are up there. They've co-worked with us at regional events. They wrote the last CYP IAPT newsletter alongside some participation groups, specifically the Cheshire CAMS crew in Cheshire wrote an article for that newsletter. And they attend meetings with us if it's appropriate. They do attend the Service Development Group, which Anne York over there chairs, and we're talking about the role at the next group of a link worker. The idea being that those young people would link out to specific participation groups and take some of the agenda items from the Service Development Group, talk about it with those groups of children and young people, then come back to the Service Development Group to sort of give children and young people's views, to make sure we're getting a range of views within that group. And one of the questions we'll ask you at the end is, would you be willing for a link worker from our young sessional workers to join with your group? So I'll just put that in your head now to think about. Anne's also very keen that a young person becomes a co-chair of the Service Development Group alongside her. So we're taking both of those roles to the next Service Development Group for ratification. So they're not in post yet, but they hopefully will be, won't they, Anne? They've also reviewed and contributed to the co-op outcomes document, which is, I think this morning was referred to as a practice guidance. So their statements are in there. They read all that documentation, which was no mean feat, I believe. It's a lot of documentation. And they reviewed that, they added to it, and they also put their views across. So some of the, there's little paragraphs in there, I believe, from young people that's saying this is how we think it should be done. And they contributed to the good practice checklist.
Our approach is that we encourage co-production of children and young people as much as possible. And what we mean by that is participation is fantastic. Co-production is also about releasing the assets that people bring to any relationship and partnership. So our own assets, but the skills and experience and knowledge of those young people beyond just being users of our services. We want to help you develop participation locally. We're not commissioned to do it for you. We try to act as a bridge to facilitate networking across and between partnerships, share good practice and development of new resources, and support children and young people to input into the national groups, as Jane just outlined. So the way we work is we try to find out what people need by doing surveys. Last year we did an email survey. This year we've streamlined it online, face-to-face. create, find and share resources. We use MyApt as our main platform for doing that, to inform, share, discuss and blog and interact with young people. We organise events to bring people younger and older together to share. And this year we're trying some online support in the form of webinars to see if they are helpful to people. And we find out what young people think by consulting with local groups. We're aware that with all the new partnerships coming on board, there'll be more groups we don't know about, and we would ask you if you please tell us where they are if you know, tell us who the leads are so that we can contact them and encompass all those young people into our work. So what would be really helpful for us from you would be to know who's the lead for participation in your partnership, where your groups are, contact details of them, whether any of them would like to be a link worker, but we can talk to them more about that, and if they'd like to be consulted on issues that are of concern nationally, that we can feed back up to the central team. And we're just starting a piece of work to involve parents and carers. This is an interim piece of work. The substantive work on parents and carers will be subject to a competitive tender. But we are setting out to find out what are the issues for parents and carers, in what ways would they like to be involved, and how does that involvement work alongside young people's participation. So our third and last activity, everyone should have one of these on their seat. We'd like you to write down one thing you're really proud of in terms of participation in your area, please. And then we'd said stick it on the participation pride wall. And all activities in participation that we do have a purpose. They're not just there to sort of, break the spell of somebody's voice. But we find these sorts of things really helpful. They help us understand what people are doing. They help us locate, identify and share success stories. So if the thing you're really proud of is something you would like to share, please put your contact name and details on there, and we'll get you on MyApt and maybe coming to events to share it, maybe co-working a webinar. But it's also really good to have so many people in the room and to hear about so much success and be able to celebrate it. So even if you don't wish to put your name, that's fine. We will still record what you say and put it onto MyApt. And we also use this kind of thing that you give us on days like this as part of our agenda setting with our young people when we're working with them, which again, they find really helpful. So it's kind of like the inward and outward flow of information between us all. So please fill one in, stick them on any wall, but the participation pride wall is at the front. These are your gift contacts. Fiona couldn't be here today, sadly. She's a contact for the Northwest. Jane, who you've met, myself, Kathy Street, who's sitting there, and our MyApt maestro, Joe Robertson. And I think that's us. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Yvonne, Jane, and particularly Tumi, who clearly has got a career as a public speaker ahead of her. To stand in front of an audience this large and not flinch, absolutely fantastic. And at the beginning of the day, I sort of said to you, what are you going to do to sustain the changes that you're making, to make them robust, to make them continue into the future, to make them automatic and instinctive practice? And surely one of these things that absolutely isn't an optional extra is the involvement of children, young people and their families. So bear that in mind. It's the absolute essential prerequisite.